So hello, my name is Ben Irving. I'm the producer of Star Wars The Old Republic out of BioWare Austin.
And I am Charles Boyd, and I am the creative director for Star Wars The Old Republic at BioWare Austin.
So coming out of Knights of the Fallen Empire was our biggest and most successful expansion we've had to date. We really wanted to just build on, the storytelling we were doing, the gameplay we were doing. And so Knights of the Eternal Throne really focuses on a couple of things. Continue the epic story we started with Knights of the Fallen Empire, all around Valkorion and his dysfunctional family, and your interactions with them as the Outlander, the veteran of the Great Galactic War. So that's the first part, continue an epic story. The second part was really this renewed focus on repeatable multiplayer content. And so for us that comes through in the form of a new system we've built called Galactic Command. And the idea of Galactic Command is it will allow the player to gain more power once they finish playing through their story. And so they're really the two tent poles of the expansion and what we were trying to achieve. Of course, there's a lot of detail in all of that, and probably a good place to start is, Charles, if you want to share some of the story stuff.
Yeah, so for players who hadn't maybe caught up on the latest stuff in the story, the player, like Ben said, has become the Outlander, and they're now commanding this alliance that's trying to defeat the Eternal Empire that's crushed the galaxy. It's really conquered everyone under their iron boot. And so it's going to be up to you to overthrow Valen, the Empress, and her brother Arkin, who she just dethroned with your, through your intervention, and ultimately make grave, important decisions between the light side and the dark side, between which members of the family you can trust, and who do you want to redeem, who do you want revenge against, who are you going to kill, who are you going to save, and ultimately find that path to the Eternal Throne and hopefully save the galaxy and maybe change it to be the way that you want it to be, whether that's for good or ill. Yeah, so every choice is different, right? And we always let the player make whichever choice they want to make in that moment. We never say, oh, you made a light side choice back there, well now you're only light side from now on. You can always play the middle. You can always choose, oh well, I really like that character, they helped me out. Maybe they're a little rough around the edges, maybe they're a little untrustworthy, but I think for my goal, for my cause, they're the right person, and so I'm going to accept a little bit of darkness, even if it means, if that's the best way to get to some good. Or vice versa, if you're evil, ruthless, you kill everyone who gets in your way, but there's just that one, buddy that you always liked. You're like, I'm going to let them stick around. I'm going to keep them around. I'll do a few nice things just so they stick around. That's always, the kind of role playing that we want players to experience, right? We want them to create their own character and their own vision of what that character would do in any situation, the kinds of choices they would make, and whether that's pure light side, pure dark side, or somewhere right in the middle.
It's kind of one of my favorite things of when Charles and the writing team let me grace their presence in some of their brainstorming sessions that they do. Hearing them talk about how do you make this decision that in the past might have been black and white, kind of gray in the middle, and how do you make the person, if they're a dark side player, maybe want to do a light side choice, or as a light side player want to do a dark side choice. And I think we certainly saw through Knights of the Fallen Empire this shift from being necessarily dark or necessarily light to very much being in between, when you look at the sum of all the decisions they made. And I think that's one of the great evolutions that these guys have done with the story. And it's certainly something that's important to us moving into Knights of the Eternal Throne.
Yeah.
The story is a really great thing. For us, it's a great way to get people back into the game excited. We're still the only game out in the marketplace right now who's telling a truly deep Star Wars story. But once you finish that story, what do you do? And that's really what Galactic Command comes to. It's our new system where any piece of content you play in the game will contribute to your growing power across the galaxy. And so one of the new bits of content we've introduced are called Uprisings. So these are that 1 to 4 player, multiplayer, 3 difficulty mode, new bits of content. And so I think that's really exciting for the multiplayer folks because you can play that by yourself. You can play it with a group of 4 people on a pretty easy difficulty, or you can really challenge yourself and play that hardest mode of difficulty that will be pretty punishing to everyone except the greatest players of our game. And I think when you talk about multiplayer content and those stories, to kind of answer your question, I think it's that challenge and that difficult experience is really what people want. Because all the stories that you tell from playing online games is that, remember that one time we defeated that thing on the hardest mode after we wiped for hours and hours and hours or weeks and weeks. And so I think we want to bring that challenge back to the game, not just for multiplayer people, but also for single player people. It's why we're adding a really hard difficulty mode to the storyline so that you can replay that story, which will contribute to Galactic Command, but you can play it on a much harder difficulty. And then I think that's just the expansion itself. I think then what will get interesting is what we do after the expansion. You know, this year we're really going to have a renewed focus on that multiplayer content to bring people who are in the game to constantly grow themselves as the Outlander, constantly get more power, to either play by themselves or with friends as they choose. And that's really what Galactic Command will facilitate, is letting you play the game however you want, alone or with friends, having hard challenges or not, and kind of just becoming more powerful.
You know, we just showed you all a little bit of being able to pilot a walker. You know, this armored walker.
That was mine.
I know, but I'm stealing it because the first time we were playtesting it, the first time I got to actually do that and drive a walker, and I didn't even know what the abilities were going to do, what exactly it was going to be capable of, because we hadn't really discussed the details. And then they just kind of put it together really fast because they were so excited about it. You know, it was this really cool new thing for us to do. And so I jump in and I hit the first button and it launches like 50 missiles. Like, you just start blowing up everybody, and it's amazing. Oh, it felt so good. It was exactly what I always dreamed of, you know, driving around in a big walker would be like from the movies. So you know, for me, that was just such a cool moment, and it's just made me so much more excited about seeing players, you know, dive in and get to experience that.
So I would like to cheat by saying two things instead of one, because I can't do one. I'm sorry, it can't be done. But so my first one is, I remember growing up as a kid playing the BioWare games, things like Baldur's Gate 2, and like the important decisions you would make. I would play the game with my best friend who lived across the street, and we would play for a day and then call each other and be like, what did you do? What did you choose? And so for me, my first moment is the scene that we showed a little earlier, where early at the start of this story, you make a really big choice about whether, you know, it's a light side or a dark side choice, and that choice greatly impacts what happens with some of, you know, the most important characters in the game. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe they become an evil foe, maybe they join you as an ally. So that's kind of was my number one thing. But my second thing is, you know, I've been a huge online gamer for a long time, and so I'm really excited about getting in the live game and playing Uprisings, you know, with a bunch of friends. I think, you know, both seeing all that content, very fast-paced, Star Wars-focused action combat, but then also, you know, if we have the skills for it, you know, trying to defeat all of that content on the hardest difficulty is kind of what I'm looking forward to when we ship the expansion.
I can talk a little bit about this expansion in particular. You know, I don't know that we've really want to get into when the whole thing might end, because, you know, we'd love to keep this going forever. It's really going to be up to the players and stuff. So, but, you know, resolution is definitely something that's important. It was actually something that came up a lot in the feedback from last year, was players feeling like, you know, I really want to finish this off, or I want to do this particular thing that I didn't quite get to do in the story, and I want that ending. I want to, you know, I want to finish something off. And when I first got the kind of overview from the writers for this year, and they were like, we want to do this, 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 and this, and we want to let you kill this character, this character, this character, this character, and this character, and this character. And I was like, if you choose to. Yeah, we want players to have that option. And I was like, oh my God, like, good grief. We're like, oh yeah, it was, I was a little intimidated at first, but they, you know, they went all out, and I was really excited about it, you know, to see us really give players that sense of finality to some of the storylines, while still leaving other things open and giving them, you know, the next step in their story, you know, really changing the game for them and giving them, you know, what's going to be that next step as the Outlander, as this character. Where do they go from here, from the end of Knights of the Eternal Throne? And that's going to be a really exciting thing to see as we move forward.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Oh man, it's our pleasure.
Thank you. We're just happy to be here. Again, you know, we spend so much of our time creating this stuff behind closed doors, and finally getting to share it all with the public is really exciting for us. So thank you for coming out to spend some time with us.